session we concluded at 5:57. We took no action, and we are reconvening in our open session at 6:04, looking for establishment of the agenda.
We move we establish the agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please indicate approval of the agenda by saying aye or yay or show me somehow.
Aye.
I'm seeing all ayes and mine is as well. So by a vote of 5-0, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have recognition for School Board Recognition Month.
Got it. This is School Board Recognition Month, and attached to the agenda is a proclamation from Governor Inslee that I would like to read and share with everyone. Whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to assure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible citizens of a democratic society who enjoy productive and satisfying lives, and whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of the public education governance system in our state, and whereas the districts and regions they leave serve more than 1 million students, have a combined annual budget of over $15 billion, and employ approximately 120,000 people. And whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the citizens in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize school directors as outstanding volunteers and champions for public education, now therefore I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2021 as School Board Recognition Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observation. That's at the state level. At our local level, speaking on behalf of myself and my executive cabinet, we cannot express our gratitude and great appreciation for our 5 school board directors in this past year. It has been an amazing journey together, and these 5 directors have just been volunteers that have gone above and beyond to support our students and of course our staff as well. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all of your time and efforts and energy spent certainly during your whole time, but in particular these past 11 months in supporting during this pandemic. Also attached to the agenda are the lovely certificates that I would normally hand to each of you. And we'd bring you all forward and take a great group picture, which we're not able to do during this time, but we'll make sure that they do get signed and sent to you, and we'll get a snap of this lovely Zoom meeting here. So again, we are so grateful for all of you and your dedication to our children and our community. So thank you.
Thank you. And it's been a year, and just on behalf of the board, you're very welcome. I know that it is a job done with love and commitment to the students and families in our district. And it's been a really challenging year, but It's only made us stronger, I think. Moving on to public input. I believe we have 2, is that correct? I can't see you. Yes, okay. So for public input, this is a meeting. The meeting is a meeting of the board in public. It is not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. If you would like to address the board on a particular issue, please complete the form attached below and submit to the board secretary by emailing the completed form at least 60 minutes prior to the meeting. When addressing the board at the meeting, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes. Appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern, and if desired, provide written documentation to the board secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of the student's parent or legal guardian. The board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to the issues expressed. As I just said, I believe we have 2, and the first one up is, sorry, going back to my emails. Liz Gorski.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address the board again. So my name is Liz Gorski. I'm the parent of a sophomore in the high school and a 5th grader at Lake Ridge Elementary. I wanted to say thank you to the board. I know it's been a really, really tough year. It has been great to see the progress in the last couple of months. The excitement with Kay going back is palpable. It certainly brought a tear to my eye to see the buses pulling up to the schools. And from parents who have kids in kindergarten, I'm sure you've seen all over social media, it's really made a difference in the lives of those children. I know this is not easy. I know you've done a lot of work to put the COVID protocols in place, but we really appreciate what you do to get us to that point. First grade is next week. Super excited for that as well. And hybrid is in sight, especially for my 5th grader, who of course I care about. I do ask though that we not rest. We have so much data and science now that shows how we can all go back full time. We see it in the 43 plus states whose public schools have opened, all the private schools across the Puget Sound region. So how do we move faster as Mercer Island? We're clearly setting the standard for the region. So can we do this too? As you know, we have a very supportive community here on Mercer Island, and we would love to be able to help. Is it taking temperatures, supervising lunch, cleaning, whatever you need, we're here. Please just ask for our help because we will gladly jump in. As we look forward to the next, to the fall, I personally don't know if we will be going back full time. I don't know if that's even in the realm of possibility. So it would be great for planning purposes if you as a board could come out with what some of your clear plans and guidelines are. Based on the budget shortfall, I'm sure that there's going to be a shortage of money, which means that teachers are going to need to be laid off and programs dropped. If you could tell us what those are in advance so that we can figure out, do we need to go to all online? Do we need to move to private schools? What does that look like? And then secondly, what is the catch-up plan? As I said, I have a sophomore who has some high aspirations for where he wants to go. He's been working his 5-year plan, and now he's at a disadvantage compared to his peers in other states and other schools. So what does that look like? Are there going to be additional classes over the summer? Is it applicable for all kids or only those who are worse behind? So as we continue to build on what we've done, thank you again for all you do. I know that it seems like parents tend to complain a lot, but we do it from a good place. And certainly when good is due or when thanks are due, we certainly give them, but appreciate your help in planning for the future. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. And our next public
President Lurie, we do not see the next person who did send an email but did not complete the form. We do not see them in our attendees at this time.
Okay.
So we cannot promote them to do public input.
All right, agreed. So unless we say that in the next couple minutes or hear that there was a internet connection, and then the board can take action at that time, public input is closed. Again, if there's a connection issue, please let us know. We certainly wouldn't want that to interfere with the opportunity to provide public input. Sorry, just getting back to my agenda. Next, we have our student representative report. And I was going to correct Donna, or Superintendent Klosky, sorry, in terms of our 5 board directors, because we clearly have 7 and appreciate them so, so much. So we are looking forward to hearing from Paul and Morgan.
Yeah, I don't think I saw my certificate on the agenda. I'm just
We'll work
kidding.
on that with the governor for next year.
We will get you one.
Let's go. Hi, everyone. We hope you all had a safe and happy holiday season. We have a bit of a shorter report this month as school is out for winter break, obviously, and our opportunities to speak with students and administrators were limited, but we are excited to share with you today.
So to start, over at Island Park, the administration wanted to sort of shout out the kindergarten teachers for all the planning and hard work that culminated in the return of the youngest learners to the building this January. So many of the families are thankful that their children can finally see each other and learn together, and the community is excited to bring back all first grades in the coming week. And then over at Northwood, they were thankful as well to have kindergartners return to the building and learn to sort of navigate the campus and learn to follow the safety procedures while learning together. And then the January character trait at Northwood is kindness. And the students and teachers across the school hope to learn more about kindness through school-wide observances of Temperance and Good Citizenship Day, Martin Luther King Day, and the Great Kindness Challenge throughout the month.
We unfortunately did not get significant opportunities to speak with students at Lake Ridge and West Mercer this month, but at the monthly superintendent advisory meeting last week, we did speak to a couple of the students and we learned of class jobs being implemented during Zoom calls, spirit days and class parties before the break, and other breakout room activities used to engage and encourage participation from students at the 2 schools. At Islander Middle School, the teachers have been working to distribute more handheld materials for students to pick up, especially in science classes, such as fold scopes. I had to look up what they were, but they're handheld microscopes, which can be assembled by the students themselves. So it's a cool little tool. And the leadership class at the middle school has also put on a few sessions of Among Us, which is like a collaborative mystery video game for the students to play together, which received excellent participation across the school. The PTSA at IMS has also been doing monthly student surveys for the students to fill out with various fun questions, and this past month was all about the students' pets.
So over at MIHS, there have been a lot of exciting things going on. Our school's radio station opened up once again, and students in the radio class have had the opportunity to go into the studios and get to record some new content, which is really exciting. In addition, band is hoping to get some more students practicing on the field, and they've kind of started this process. They've been designating some small practice pods of about 6 people and are learning some marching. And then the green team has also been very active. They've really been focusing their efforts on how to sort of remain sustainable during the pandemic. And this includes sort of encouraging students to do things like buying a reusable mask, for example, instead of using disposable ones.
In addition to the information from the different schools, we also wanted to share some key thoughts and takeaways from the superintendent advisory meeting, where students had the opportunity to discuss and ask questions about returning to school in a hybrid model. Students had concerns about how hybrid learning would affect online learning and what streamed classes or lectures would look like, and whether this would work for them. Transportation to school was also discussed, and students wanted to figure out how they would attend school safely. I feel as if the students are aware that extracurricular and activities like lunchtime would look a little different, but I also think they're ready and prepared to embrace the challenge that comes with a return. With finals coming up at the high school, I've noticed this, and I've spoken to teachers, that students are starting to see the effects of their study habits and success. And while we have definitely seen progress with what schools look like over the past few months of online learning, as a student representative, I think the students are willing to and want to take more steps to return to that collaborative hybrid model. As I think some of the downsides of online school has we've started to notice some more, just myself and among other students.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Paul said. I think it really captures what I took away as well. And one aspect that I kind of noticed from the advisory was definitely a general excitement at the prospect of returning to school, at least in some capacity. But as Paul mentioned, a little apprehension as well, because students have kind of become used to learning online and structuring their habits around this new way of life. And so the transition to hybrid is definitely going to be something that many are going to need to sort of ease into. However, older and younger students alike all really expressed some kind of joyful anticipation at the thought of getting to see their friends again, to interact with their teachers again, or even meet some teachers for the first time. I know I have teachers who I haven't even met before, so I'm excited about that. And really overall, just excited to get out of the house regularly. Like just even the little things are very exciting. So yeah, that's all we have for you.
Thank you guys so much. I just want to see if any directors have any questions or comments for our student directors.
Just wanted to say add my thank you to that and say, especially right now when we can't just like swing by a school or see what's going on as we're picking our own kids up from school, that kind of thing. It's especially helpful to hear from you guys. So thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, adding into that, especially right now, as you know, our legislative session has started in Olympia, and it's crazy this year watching everything unfold just this last week, all via Zoom. So imagine legislators attempting to do this. You kids are doing an amazing job. But during that, as things come up, I certainly want to hear more from you and concerns that are coming up from students as it can inform our legislative positions and advocacy. So however we can work along with the superintendent to convey your input and ideas and how you're experiencing to the board as a whole, and so that we can advocate on your behalf. This is going to be a really important legislative session, certainly probably one of the most pivotal in my lifetime. And so it'll be really important to have your voices as representatives of the student body, as well as other students. So thank you so much for your dedication and your hard work. This is so much above and beyond what you signed up for, but you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you, guys. Our second public input person is now online. So unless anyone has an objection, I'd like to give the opportunity to speak due to our circumstances. I'm seeing all yeses. I just don't want to make a unilateral decision. So Andreeves will set that up. All right.
Hi, sorry. Can you
We
hear me?
understand. Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. And I apologize I couldn't get here sooner. Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to let me speak this evening. I hope that I understand only one other person has been able to speak tonight, but we really hope that you hear us, because frankly, it's the health and welfare of our school district, from my perspective, is as dependent on our staff as it is on anything else going on in our community. There is tremendous discussion between the federal and state governing bodies as to how to roll out the vaccines for the COVID-19. Currently, only about 1/3 of the vaccines have already been distributed to Washington State and put to use. Further, there's discussion at all levels about what to do with the remaining vaccine doses at the end of the day, if they're not available to patients who have already registered and meet the criteria. Rather than throwing those vaccines out, it seems pretty obvious that they should go to people who are in a standing in line position, so to speak. I just want to put that out there in terms of planning. But specifically to our position, the wider rollout for the vaccines are not set to begin until February 1st. bringing additional students on board buses and into our schools prior to the opportunity for the majority of our staff to receive the vaccinations puts all of our staff at risk. I'm not just speaking of our teachers and parapro staff working directly with students, also our healthcare staff, which sometimes includes our administrative assistants in the offices, as well as parapro people and the nursing staff. Further, are our school bus drivers, most especially those who work with the special needs students. For example, I am currently driving 4 students on a regular basis, 2 of whom I drive to and from school. Next week, I'll be helping out by additionally driving another student with special needs. The students range from elementary school, middle school, high school, and the transition program. I prefer not having anyone else on board to assist my students if they need help with seatbelt buckling. Each additional person getting on my bus puts me at an additional risk for COVID-19. As I've been helping students with special needs buckle up for 26 plus years now, I'm pretty comfortable and skilled at doing so. I wear a KN95 mask and a face shield when driving students, as CDC has recently come out with new data backed up by the University of Washington. COVID-19 aerosols can linger in the air for upwards of 3 to 4 hours in a relatively enclosed space. So I don't take my face mask off unless it's absolutely necessary, and never when students are on board. I know that different drivers do different things, but we're doing our best to try and secure our safety, which means we're also trying to protect our students. In doing so, we protect each other. We protect the further staff that goes out into the schools. We want to be included and not pushed off to the side when we're talking about those people who work with our special needs students in particular. In terms of the big buses, those people are also driving now a select group of kindergartners and other kids who are highly impacted. Before you start bringing in more students, we have to do our best to protect us. I don't know how many drivers specifically are over the age of 50 or even over the age of 60. There are many of us. Last week, we were out 4 drivers, 4, out sick. It's irrelevant whether they had COVID-19 or not. We were so strapped for drivers that our administrative assistant had to fill in for us. That's critical mass. Anybody more gets sick and you don't have the drivers to take the students who we're currently carrying because we don't have the substitutes to cover for that.
All right, you have exceeded the 3 minutes, so I need you to.
Okay, sorry. I just ask that you look at the broad picture and you consider all of these things before you just bring back more students in. I know the pressure is great on all of you, but the pressure is great on us as well. And we're doing our best to do our best for the district. Help us do that. Include us in the rollouts when they come available. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Next on the agenda is Superintendent Report, Board Policy 1800 OE9, Communication and Support to the Board.
Thank you. Andrews, could you check to see if Director Jamie Prescott is in attendance and bring her into the meeting? I don't think we needed Heidi Clark at this time. Not that we don't love seeing you, Heidi, but.
Welcome, Heidi. That was my bad. I will put.
And who is going to drive the slide deck?
I can do that.
While we're waiting to bring this up, I will just talk a little bit about yesterday's closure, as the board is aware, Mercer Island, along with many school districts in the region, didn't have power due to the storm on late Tuesday evening. So we did have to close school for both in-person and remote learning, and we will have to use one of our weather makeup days to make up for that. We do have some built in the calendar, and we'll be sending information out about that at a later date. Today, we still had some families that all of our school sites had power and internet, but we still had some families that did not have power. So we did have to put out a notice about for our remote learners that we were aware that some families were without it, and absences in any remote learning would be excused. And we made sure our teachers were aware of it as well, so that asynchronous learning could be assigned for students so they would be able to meaningfully participate. And we are having some glitchy internet here at the district right now. We have Andrews to thank for getting us up and running. We were a little bit in a bit of a panic mode at about 4:15 when our internet provider was having some problems. And so hopefully we're not too glitchy for those who are listening and watching, but we're gonna move on forward, and we are recording, so folks will be able to watch this later. So here we are with our in-person moving forward plans. And just a reminder for everyone, we always are grounding our decisions in our values, vision, and mission. Students are the priority, and we think we've done a really good job of a couple of the values, providing rigorous and challenging learning, particularly in the remote setting, and ensuring our school communities are safe and supportive, but we really need to get back to in-person so that we can really emphasize supporting the whole child and those creating those inclusive and equitable learning settings. So moving to the next slide, I think you've seen this graphic many times. We talked at the beginning about, in our Learning Forward groups, about how there was phases of red being fully remote, orange kind of being the bridge to some in-person and some remote, yellow learning where students are spending more time in person, and green is that eventuality of hopefully having majority of our students in, as we know everyone is looking forward to as we get past this pandemic, which isn't going to be in the near, but we do have to remain hopeful and look out for the future for that and plan for that. So we took that same graphic and added some needles to the dial. Fred, do you want to describe this a little bit, where we are now?
Sure. And as some of our public comments alluded to, going all the way back to September, we were starting to move the needle. Thanks to our bus drivers, our nurses, our custodians, our staff who works with students who need a variety of services. As we know, we started bringing back students the second week of school in September. And so we started moving some of the students out of just a red model. We've enhanced that. By the beginning of December, we had our early childhood program up and running. And then on January 6th, we opened the doors for our kindergarten classes. And I saw in the audience tonight virtually some of those kindergarten teachers who made that happen and who have been off and running. And we can't thank them enough for helping to take the next steps forward and really modeling the way as we've moved forward. As I described it to some of colleagues from around the region who have called, anxiously trying to hear how it's going. The best way I can say is it's been uneventful, which couldn't be any better. The students are coming and they're leaving, and their day is filled with joy. Superintendent Koloski, Director Bergstrom, and I had a chance, and Director Rock had a chance to talk to Boys and Girls Club the other day, starting to gear up transportation for our next students coming. And Becky Shattle, who's the director of programming, she said, you wouldn't believe how joyful those kindergartners are when they're coming home or coming back to the club, just anxious to tell them all about their day, and the other students now looking on with great envy. And that was certainly a highlight of my week right before the windstorms, or as they had finally subsided. But this graphic shows that we're on our way. We have learners in all of the different phases now. Yep, we're not to green. I'm not even sure what green looks like. I don't think green looks like last March, and I hope that it doesn't. I hope we've evolved. I hope we've grown. I hope we've changed as a profession, and it's all for the better of students. But we're excited that the needle's starting to move for all students. So I basically just kind of covered this. These are all tremendous celebrations, and we're very much looking forward to Tuesday. Today was our training day with all of our first grade teachers, as well as other staff who will be also joining first grade teachers in supporting our elementary schools. So we had a tremendous training this morning, again, with a very similar training to the kindergarten staff. And then tomorrow will be another asynchronous day for our first graders, as our staff will take the last day for preparations. And then Tuesday, buses will be fuller, schools will be fuller, playgrounds will be fuller, and the excitement builds.
So
Donna,
moving,
you or Jamie?
I'll take the next one. Our in-person hybrid learning timeline. We know that many have been waiting for this. We do need to share with the board that our Learning Forward teams were all scheduled for Wednesday and could not meet as they had planned because of the school closure and the power being down. So much of what we're going to share with you are things that will be still presented to the Learning Forward groups, but we did want to still move forward with the board to kind of let you see a timeline that of course has some flexibility to it. All of this is still depends on the decision tree / toolkit as we navigate through that. And we do still want to make sure that we get the input and kind of thumbs up from our Learning Forward groups as well. They were hoping to meet Wednesday so that we'd have that complete information for you this afternoon, evening. So we know we have first grade ready to come in next week after the Monday holiday. And then our next group per the toolkit will be our next set of youngest learners, which will be our second and third graders. Now we have to move to hybrid for all our groups of students beyond first grade because of the physical distancing. The 6-foot physical distancing doesn't allow us to bring in whole classes like we can in K and 1. We made that adjustment to the smaller classes so we can bring those whole classes in. So our plan as it stands right now is have our students in second and third grade begin their hybrid schedule on February 8th. Next to transition in would be our 4th and 5th graders. All of these are considered youngest learners when you look at the chart that is embedded in the toolkit, and they would begin on February 24th. This seems like a longer timeline, but remember we have midwinter break in that, I think it's the 3rd week of February. Then our plan for the middle school is to start with our 6th graders and bring them in first with a potential date of March 8th. But that schedule would then be the in-person, meaning the hybrid would begin on March 9th. We'll describe their schedules here in a little bit. And then following the 6th graders, we would then next bring in our 7th and 8th graders, and they would begin on March 16th. Then if all is going well, our transmission rates are staying where they need to be, which we are pretty confident with all of our mitigation strategies. We can then move forward with our high school, and the intent is to bring our freshmen in first since they have not experienced their campus yet, and bring them in on March 16th. The 15th would be the first day of the new schedule, but it would be a remote learning day. The 16th would then be the first day for in-person for the 9th grade. And then following that, the rest of the grades in high school, if all continues to go well, would be on March 23rd for the rest of our high school, grades 10, 11, and 12.
So one of the questions that we've received from some parents is certainly, why a hybrid for 2nd through 12th grade? And they've looked to other examples of either private schools or schools across the country. And they think thinking about it in terms of science, about dependent variables and independent variables. Our schedule and the decision to do hybrid was dependent on really 3 things. As Superintendent Klosky said, we still need to maintain the physical distancing of 6 feet. That is not necessarily the case in all 50 states, but it is in the state of Washington. And so that is one factor that then impacts is impacted by the square feet in our classrooms and how many square feet we have to work with. And then we're also impacted by our class sizes. And so whereas in kindergarten and 1st grade, we really controlled for class size at the beginning of the year, and we reduced the numbers so that they'd be small enough to keep students 6 feet apart and also maintain the square footage requirements by the classroom. Just 2nd through 12th grade, we're not able to do that. Therefore, the hybrid allows us to have half the students in and half the students out on any given day. Jamie.
So as we recently surveyed 2nd through 5th grade parents, one of the things we've tried to do is identify the options for when we return to in-person learning. And parents have been asked to select between a hybrid learner and a streaming learner. Hybrid learners are those who attend in person on either group A or group B consistently. And then on the days that they are not in person, they attend via streaming. Streaming learners are those who attend school via streaming on all school days and don't return at all into the building. And so right now we had, I think when I checked last night, we had over 700 elementary 2nd through 5th grade families respond. And overwhelmingly, it was at 85% wanted hybrid learner. So they wanted to be in the building. And we had about 15% indicating that they wanted to remain streaming learners.
So the 2nd through 5th grade student day is very similar to our kindergarten and our 1st grade day. The elementary students in 2nd through 5th grade who were in for the day come to school, and we have classes from 9:15 to 12:30 in 2 large learning blocks separated by a recess. The students then who are at home streaming also participate in those, although when it's recess time, they're obviously at home for that time period. Then we have a transition, and our food services team through Chartwells, it will be providing lunches and has been to our kindergartners who have elected to receive a lunch, and they take that home, and other students will. There's a transition home where there's lunchtime and the students have a break. And then all students resume on Zoom as streamers in the afternoon, where they continue to receive their 3rd major block of time. And then that leaves the remaining time in the school day for either intervention, further support with students, teacher collaboration time, but then also students have those chances to take advantage of the asynchronous specialist offerings through art, music, PE, and Spanish. The 6th through the 12th grade student day will look quite different from what it does right now. And I'm going to start with the bottom first and then work our way back up. Some of our families are certainly aware because they've had high schoolers, and some of them this might be new information for them. We have obviously long had a contract with Metro buses, where they have been transporting almost all of our high school students who have chosen to take advantage of bus services to and from school. This particular year, due to rising costs for Metro, as well as physical distancing requirements for them, it really made it untenable for us to continue to maintain that contract. Therefore, our bus drivers and our buses will be transporting our high schoolers for the first time. That certainly adds a dynamic to the scheduling aspect of school, because we now need to take into account the time it takes to do the high school run, drop those students off, then go back out onto the island, pick up middle school students, drop them off, and then go out again and do a third loop to pick up elementary students. Even with that, our middle school and our high school have looked at various options and decided that expanding the school day, though it isn't as long as it might typically be in previous years, you can see that about 6.5 hours of time. It might adjust slightly, 5 minutes or 7 minutes here or there, just because of the scheduling that Director Patrick Rock needs to do with transportation. But we're anticipating about an 8:30 to 3 o'clock day for our middle school students, and an 8 to 3:30 or 2:30 day for our high school students. Obviously, you can see that there's going to be quite a bit of time if you're a streaming learner, or on those days when they're at home, where they're learning from their computers via Zoom. But I think it's also important to remember that just like in a normal classroom environment, teachers are not lecturing and standing up in front of students the entire time. There are those times when there's a mini lesson to start, or there's a whole group lesson, and then students work independently. So we are already thinking about what that looks like. And then certainly there's the changing dynamic about teaching the students in front of you while the students are at home, and how are we grouping students. And it's a learning curve for us, but I know that we have the educators committed to making it work the very best we can. Superintendent Klosky, do you want to add anything more to that with the challenges or anything? Did I miss a piece?
No, I just wanted to circle back a little bit. Jamie mentioned the grades 2 through 5 survey. And I know that our middle and high school parents we've asked them to watch for that survey. So can we give them an approximate timeline of when they'll be seeing that?
It's coming tomorrow.
There you go. So as the board is aware, we have a lot of community and state partners in this endeavor. It looks like a lot, and it is a lot. We have a lot of avenues that our recommendations, a lot of them are mandates. It started with OSPI, and we still confer with them on a regular weekly basis. There's a superintendent conference probably every other week. We meet regularly with our partners, our labor partners in MIA. As everyone's aware, the governor's office has come out with different proclamations and mandates that have impacted certainly all the way up to the board level with the OPMA, as well as at student level with the latest piece that the governor did a proclamation to encourage having students back in buildings that was aligned with the Washington Department of Health toolkit. We meet regularly, weekly. We have great partners in public health, Seattle, King County, and frequently we get to also hear from other local county health officials. Pierce County and Snohomish are frequently at our ESD meetings as well. Of course, the board, we always keep you in the loop, and then our families and our PTA council as well. And Department of Labor and Industry has also provided some guidance as to the different risk levels that are inherent in any workplace. And I want to remind everyone that there are very, very, very few spaces within our school system that are considered a high risk. With all of the mitigation strategies that we have implemented and that we will continue to implement, and that we are really insistent on, our classrooms are low risk environments for students and for staff. Next, we wanted to update you just a little bit where information can be found. We know there's so much communication going out and so much information. So we do have a COVID-19 response and learning forward page that's linked right to our website. And if you click on the section that says COVID-19 dashboard, that is a place where we have created a table, so to speak, that our nurses update on a regular basis that lists how many students are currently or weekly in person at our schools, and do we have any identified positive COVID cases in our schools, and what is the transmission for those. So anyone who's looking for that information, you find it right on the front of our website with a yellow banner, and then it's also linked on our, the dashboard is linked on our COVID-19 page as well. And then of course there's the Public Health Seattle King County website that has all kinds of dashboards with the information on the current key indicators and where the counts are. Currently, we have pushed back into that higher level. The current counts today, I believe, were 352 when I checked them. But even with bringing in our first graders next week, we double checked with our partners at the King County Public Health, and they have approved our plan and said, yes, we can continue to bring in our youngest learners, and that is embedded in the high risk area. So we did, as I mentioned, we had a meeting earlier this week that included our King and Pierce County Department of Health directors, and they had a lot of questions from the superintendents. There were some questions about, everybody's been hearing and reading about the variant strain, and would it be impacting any of the decision tree or matrix for schools? And their response was no, they would not be changing the approach or recommendations for our schools. Then there was a lot of conversation around vaccines, just as the board heard during public input tonight. So for staff vaccines, there is several items and charts and reports that are available on the Washington State Department of Health website of how they have prioritized this vaccine allocation framework. I encourage folks to look at that. There's a 52-page report that really does explain what the public health experts, all of the different tools they used in making their prioritization categories. I think that it's really important to note that equity is a cross-cutting focus throughout their entire decision-making tool and framework. So every subgroup, of course, as we heard from our King and Pierce County Department of Health directors, every subgroup has contacted them and said, we think we should be higher up on that list. We think we should be prioritized higher. They didn't anticipate that there would be changes in the list, but they did really emphasize to all of us that schools are not high risk environments. We are a space where we can have all of the mitigation strategies in place. Health, and we'll go through them all again here in a little bit. But because of all of that, that's what keeps our schools at a low risk environment. They really repeated more than once that the vaccine is not necessary for schools to reopen. It is not something that's listed in the toolkit. It is not something that any of the plans have said. Schools should not move forward with bringing students to in-person learning unless there is a vaccine. That's never been part of the plan, and all of the research and studies that have been done have been around the mitigation strategies and how well we implement those. Fred, you want to talk a little bit about what they shared with us on the Pierce County testing pilot that a few districts participated in?
Sure. 3 districts were selected through a grant down in Pierce County. I understand that there might be something similar through the Gates Foundation in King County, although at this point we haven't heard much about that. But 3 districts, it was Peninsula School District, Eatonville School District, and White River School District who participated. It was basically the 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and the winter break is when the pilot occurred. They administered between the 3 districts 10,000 tests between students and staff. When they tallied everything up and looked at the different test positivity, the rate was extremely low at 0.2% for test positivity. I think that helped to inform and influence Dr. Chen, who is the head doctor for Pierce County. I think it helped to influence some of his thinking and recommendations to the Educational Service District, which were supported by Patty Hayes via Dr. Duchin about the need for our schools to continue to be very vigilant about their mitigating measures against COVID-19, but to also continue to know that everything working together is what's really going to help us. Dr. Chen used the examples of those of us, and I shared this with the first grade team this morning, those of us who remember the days when you'd go to the dentist and they didn't put gloves on. And you know, that was a reality at one point because, you know, there wasn't the concern of HIV. Here we are now, and you go to the dentist on any given day and they have gloves and masks and shields and gowns, and they wear the PPE. We don't have a vaccine for HIV, but we know how to control it. We don't have a vaccine for Ebola, but we know how to control it. And so the vaccine is an added benefit for COVID-19, but it's only one of the mitigating measures that are out there right now. And it's going to take the vaccine plus the masks, plus the physical distancing, plus the hand hygiene, and that's what's really going to make a difference. But to think that the vaccine is the only way that we're going to get back to life as we knew it or close to it, the point was made by Dr. Chen that that's just not where we need to put all of our eggs right now. We'll continue to press forward, and hopefully the vaccination will be taken by more people than who choose not to, because that will only help things. But it's everyone working together on that. I would also say that even to this point in our school district, we'll update the COVID dashboard tomorrow when the nurses convene. They typically meet on Thursdays to update that dashboard, but because of training today, we'll meet tomorrow. And to date, we don't have any transmissions from the school district that can be traced back to the school district. All of the contact tracing that our nurses have been vigilant with have traced everything to sources outside of the school district or spouses, loved ones who people have had contact with. So I know that, you know, the concern is real, and we fully embrace that. And all of us have a certain degree of that, but I am proud of everyone who's come to the district so far and continue to work with students. They've done it and have been following all of our practices and procedures. Our nurses have been very adamant and steadfast in their expectation of us. And I want to thank them certainly for all of that. They've only helped us and added as an asset to our organization.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? On the slide before, one more back. It was, maybe it was from the website. It was the chart of the COVID.
Yep.
Says. I thought I saw one, I could have misread it, that said that there was one case of transmission traced to inside schools, Northwood. Is that but then there's zeros other places. Where's the error?
I will check with our nurses tomorrow on that. And I know Carla's on it right now. She could even ping me on that one. I think that one gets moved. I don't think that one is in the right category right there, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Just don't want to hear the message that there are none when I'm seeing a 1, but it's not consistent with the rest of the line. So
Got it.
thank you.
Yep, I'll loop back. But again, this will be updated tomorrow. And then next week, obviously, we're going to add numbers here because we'll have first graders. So these numbers are going to grow quickly, which is where we want to see the number growth anyway.
I have a question too. Is this a good time or should I wait till the end?
Go ahead. We'll have questions at the end as well, but go ahead.
Okay, so just to be super clear, you know, given that our numbers are above 350 cases per 100,000 now in this county, right? And when we look at what used to be the decision tree from OSPI, which has a different name now, they have that as the red category, right? Anything over 350 is the red category, and in general, they're recommending in person for only the younger kids at that point. But because we have the space and because we have so many layers of protection in place, we feel that we can go ahead and safely continue with hybrid planning, et cetera.
Right. One of the things they did with the toolkit was define youngest learners. In the original one, it just said youngest learners, and everyone kept asking, well, what does that mean? And they've defined it in the new toolkit as being K through 5. So really our elementary students. And again, it's that bringing them in those grade bands and phasing it in so that you're showing that you're not impacting transmission. And you are also implementing all of the mitigation strategies, even in they're calling it high now, which is also color coded as red.
Thank you.
So if we could move Fred to slide, I think it's 14.
Follow up to Maggie High is similar to Maggie's High's clarifying question.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand about the when we go above the community transmission rate, but has there been conversation about what is that baseline rate for ourselves? Like, is it 5 students who are sick, or 10 that we revert back? Have there's been conversation about that?
So we all work again in partnership with public health. Our nurses do the contact tracing, but that's who they're conferring with. So an outbreak is defined by the public health as, help me out, Fred, make sure I get it right, because I don't have it right in front of me, but there is a chart that defines it as, I believe, 2 or more within the same class. And that's when we work with them as to who do we have to quarantine and for how long. They've also stated that it doesn't mean you have to close the whole school down. It might mean that you have to, if you've been really good about being able to cohort students, that it might be that cohort of students, which again is why the elementary students come in first, is because it is much easier to cohort them. So it might be that one class goes to remote learning for the time that the class has to be cohorted. So we do still partner, our nurses do still partner with public health when they're doing their contact tracing to have them help to identify, is it an outbreak, and what's the recommendation from public health as to our next steps.
And just one other addition to that, the 2 cases have to be connected in order for it to be determined an outbreak. So unless they're connected, then they're treated as separate, even if those students may have been in the same class. So they have to be traced back so that they're linked together. And just to reiterate what Superintendent Koloski has said there, if we think back to last March with Hazen High School or Bothell High School here in the area, when they had 1 student test positive, we knew so little that the whole school was shutting down. The Department of Health has talked about the fact that you might have a student who tests positive for COVID-19. Through contact tracing, there might be a few students in a class who have to quarantine, but it's not necessarily automatically going to force the quarantine of an entire class. It really has to go back to the contact tracing, which is what's really helped us out so far, because even staff who have tested positive for COVID-19 in the district, we've been able to go back, and we go back 48 hours from prior to when the symptoms start. We start looking at who they've been with, and everyone's been wearing masks. Everyone's been doing the right thing. We've had some incidences where it wasn't quite, we weren't quite as vigilant. And unfortunately, then those staff, we do lose them for a period of time, but we've learned each time, and everyone has been extremely honest, and the attestations are working. So that's been great. Our nurse, Carla, who is on board tonight too, listening in, she's in the process of updating this chart. That one is just in the wrong spot. So every 5 minutes, this gets refreshed. So momentarily, this will get corrected. It was just put into the wrong category. Thank you, Carla.
So moving in the slide deck to what do we know now? So again, this is the current information that comes directly from the Department Health Prioritization Vaccine Allocation Framework, I believe it's called. Phase 1 is what we are currently in. We are in, King County is in phase 1A. And we're reminded when we have our meetings with Department of Health that King County is the most populous county in the state. And so there are a lot of healthcare workers that all fit in that 1A category. And so we aren't to a space that we are moving beyond that. I do think they've started to move into the next category that will impact some of our employees who are older than 70. We have a few who fit in that category. And so our HR department and our nurses are working in collaboration to identify those employees and let them know what's the process if they choose to get the vaccine. How can they make an appointment and where can they go to get that? Our nurses were in the very first group, and I believe they are all on track. If they haven't already had their first vaccine, they are on track to get it in the next few days. Phase 1B2 will impact a great majority of our staff, almost 50% of our staff. It is defined as in B2 as K-12 educators and staff over 50 years of age. And the estimated timeline is February for that. And then phase 1B4 is K-12 educators and staff under 50 years of age. And if you look at the graphic for that, the estimated timeline is April. We put a couple of quotes here from our Department of Health directors when questioned about the vaccine. They did say that changes to the schedule and allocation of the vaccine is driven by the vaccine supply. So they were hopeful that in changes in administration at the federal level, they were not going to make any changes in the near because they were looking a little bit out that perhaps after next Tuesday, there might be some more release of vaccine to the states, which would allow them to then have access to more supply, which might then move things forward more quickly. They also remind us constantly that even staff who are vaccinated will need to continue all of the risk mitigation strategies that are in place. They reiterated that to us frequently, that those are the most important pieces that we need to be paying attention to. I think
we're going to push some pictures out through social media, but our nurses were all getting vaccinated last week and over the weekend, and sending pictures of them and their vaccination as they're part of that first group. And so we do have staff who are underway with the process, abiding by that. And obviously the nurses will continue, but it does give us great encouragement that that is another layer that's on its way.
And I think, you know, just to conclude the conversation around the vaccine from our partners in public health, a quote from them: in short, the vaccine should not be thought of as the silver bullet that will allow us to reopen schools. Instead, along with all of the other measures we are putting into place, the vaccine will help us overcome COVID-19 and move past the imposition of this disease. So it really is that our schools are a very safe place. We're able to really control the environment so much more than many of the public spaces that that people are in. And so just to review those safety measures, Fred will go through these really quickly because you've seen them many times, but we wanted to put this slide out there again. All of the things that we're paying attention to in our COVID response plan.
This has been one that we've had up there. I think one that we've talked about a little bit more recently is some of the ventilation. Our operations and maintenance team certainly in all of the buildings updated and enhanced the ventilation in all of our schools. And it's to the point where, classrooms that have an option for opening a door or window certainly can, but the quality of the air that we are being able to move through the schools is quite sufficient and is doing a great job right now. So we have lots of things in place right now, and the contact tracing is certainly part of it. If you go back to the toolkit and formerly the decision tree, after the metric pieces, those other two parts of that decision-making tree or toolkit that are just as important. One is, do you have all these things in place? And two is, can you contact trace and make sure that you are controlling any outbreaks? And so far, we've checked all of those boxes. And again, that is everyone working together in our school district to make that happen. Just talking about contact tracing, because as students are coming back, this has certainly been a question that's come up. And as parents are making decisions about whether or not they're comfortable with their child becoming a hybrid learner, what's our process? First and foremost, we have our daily health attestations. And so when a staff member or a student fails that attestation, that then automatically alerts our nurses to start a process where they start checking in with that family or that staff member to see how they're doing and to see whether or not these might be COVID symptoms, and then make recommendations. We also ask that if a staff member or a student tests positive for COVID-19, that they alert a building administrator, a teacher, or certainly the school nurse, so that we can start the contact tracing process. In some cases, the contact tracing might be handled by public health because of the exposure being at somewhere like Boys and Girls Club or whatnot, where they don't do the contact tracing. But we are tremendous partners in that, thanks to our nurses. The next one is, how's the district tracking staff or students that have tested positive? You saw the dashboard that we've put together. And then you can see also the transmission rate isn't necessary at this point in terms of trying to calculate that based on our small numbers. But we are looking constantly at the King County website, as well as what's happening here on Mercer Island and some of the other outlying areas where many of our staff members come from. And then we touched on this before, but what is a close contact? And this is something that it makes all of us nervous when we hear that, wow, we may have been near someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. But it's remembering that a close contact really is really not considered unless you've spent 15 minutes or more within 6 feet without a mask of someone. And so as long as we are adhering to those very important mitigating measures, we're hoping to limit the close contacts. Are we going to have them? Yes, we certainly will, as we bring more and more people together. But can we then use hand washing and other strategies, the cleaning that we're doing, the restroom cleaning twice daily, the bus cleaning that our bus drivers are doing in between rides, at nighttime doing full cleans of the buses. All of those things we think are going to help.
And just before we go to questions, one last piece to circle back to the vaccine. We know that we have lots of staff members who are ready and willing to get theirs now, and we want to support and make it as accessible as we can. That's why HR has already created all kinds of lists, and we'll work in partnership with the nurses. Fred's been tagged by a couple of the providers as our COVID response director. He's been tagged by, I think it was Safeway of all places. Would we partner with them? We've said absolutely. We will do everything we can for our employees when it's their time, they're in the phase, to make it accessible for them so that they are able to get the vaccine, and especially for those who are willing and wanting to get that. We're going to support and make it as accessible as we can when that time comes for those who are ready for it, just like we were able to do with our nurses and some of our other employees who have medical licenses, so to speak. We've already been able to support them, and we'll continue to make it as accessible as we can for employees who want to get the vaccine. Brian.
Thank you. I'm going way back in the presentation. Do you have a ballpark figure as far as enrollment of what students are currently receiving in-person services like kindergarten and preschool, and then students that are receiving special services, which is slightly different, and then those students that are involved with in-person athletics or clubs, like those three numbers? Do you have access to those, or maybe by the end of the meeting, could you have those?
I can, going off of our average number of persons in school a week, I can start with that. The athletic piece, I don't think I have those numbers as much, but we can work on some of those. I know when we last reported, I believe it was over 300 student athletes who were regularly participating at the high school. And then I believe the number was just under 100, maybe closer to 80 student athletes down at the middle school who were participating in different ways there. So, but that data is a little bit stale. That was probably right before the winter break, Director Jeannie Upton, so we can update that. Going off of our schools, Northwood has 41 kindergartners who are enrolled right now or who are attending. And then we have another handful of early childhood preschool students. I think it's just under 30 who come in throughout the week, or right around 30. Island Park has about 37, well, I shouldn't say about, 37 is pretty exact, 37 kindergartners, 43 at Lake Ridge, and then 47 at West Mercer. We do have some other students, and this is the data cleanup we need to do, that we're bringing in first grade through fifth grade. These would be students needing some additional services because of their deficits in learning because of remote. So we'll clean up some of that. And then the middle school and high school are each bringing in 30 and 33 respectively every day for some form of learning, or at least more days than not throughout the week.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Tomorrow morning, President Lurie and I will be on our standing East Side conversation with directors, and we're meeting tomorrow with Director Patty Hayes of Public Health and other leaders. So it'll be great to have those numbers to report out. People are watching. Yeah, really excited.
For our special education, it's, I believe, last time I talked to Dr. Booby, it's about 60 across the district. Is that correct, Fred? Is that the number?
Yes, just over 60 receiving services on a routine basis. Some of those are as long as 2/3 or 3/4 of the day, and others it might be a couple hours every other day, just depending on need. And I'm sure the principals are going to light my phone up here in a moment of all the things that maybe I didn't quite do, but that's what it's all about.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I know there was great trepidation from many of our staff about returning to school. And now that our kindergartners have been in for a whole week, have you heard anything about the feelings changing, the comfort level changing, getting stronger?
Well, we do kind of feel that everyone has to go through their own phases of mindset when it comes to what is perceived as a great change, because it is a change. People have really gotten used to the way they're doing things now, and now we're asking them to make a change, and we're really empathetic to that. So yes, our folks at the upper grades that maybe were thinking it was much further away, are going through some of the phases that our kindergarten teachers went through, back in November. And so our elementary principals are talking with our middle and high school leaders about here's some of the things that we saw our staff kind of transition through as they worked through just learning how this change was going to occur and how they were going to adapt to it. So I think everyone has to personally go through that. So once you're in, certainly it's different for you than someone who's having to anticipate it. So I don't know if overall it's made a huge change. I think the schedule that came out for vaccines was a place where people had hoped that they would be sooner on the list. And so we've really sought some information, again, from our public health partners to say, help us tell the scientific story about this. And we're hoping to get a statement at our meeting on Wednesday. Our public health officials from Pierce and King County both agreed that they would write kind of a joint statement for the vaccine not being a something that schools going to in person should really be dependent on, and what's the rationale behind that. So we wait for that as well.
I think some of the conversations that I've been having have been indicative of really the shift from it being all about safety, and there will always be an element of that, and there always should be an element for that, but it's shifting to also the teaching and learning. Our instructional technology coaches and Dreves and Jamie and others have been setting up kind of model classrooms to showcase how one might set up their classroom. I've been fortunate enough to be working with a team of teachers on some literacy work that they're doing, and they've allowed me to kind of dig in as a teacher a little bit, and it's been great. But what I'm hearing from them is, we're understanding and we're coming back, but we want to come back and do this well. And so what are we doing with technology? How, what's going to be available for students? The conversation I was in right before this through text was, Fred, we have to have iPads for students. That's so much of our curriculum's tied for that. If they just leave it at home, how are we going to overcome this? And I welcome that conversation because that's all about the student learning. And so while it may not be exactly pieces where people are saying, I'm no longer worried at all and that's gone, I think it's more of a shift of, we'll always be worried, but we can do this. We can do hard things, and let's focus on students. And those have been really energizing conversations for me personally.
We do know as well, as we've planned the incremental bringing students back, that our coaches have spent some time with Jamie in looking at that as well, in how their bandwidth will allow them to support teachers in the building with a hybrid model that includes live streaming in person and all the equipment around that. So they've even asked for the phase-in dates as well for when teachers are in the building, just so that they have the capacity to be able to support everyone coming in. Jamie, anything to add to that space? I know you've been having a lot of those conversations with our technology instructional coaches.
To reiterate, staff has expressed to administrators, to coaches, that they want to do this well. Just like they learned from spring and we grew and adapted to what we are currently offering as they look ahead to this next step, much like we thought we couldn't do what we are currently doing 7 months ago. I think that's the new fear and the new angst is, how am I going to do this? And so I know the coaches are advocating, they're seeking resources and trying to figure out who's out there doing things. We've been talking to other districts and going to host some roundtables with teachers who are streaming and teaching in person at the same time, because we've heard from teachers that they really want to hear from other teachers. And so, I think on all fronts, people want as much information as possible, and they want to feel comforted that they're going to be able to be successful in this. And so You know, people are excited to work with their colleagues and give them opportunities to ask questions, trial and error, and figure out how we can best meet students' needs.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Fred, can we go back to the timeline?
Yes, give me 1 second to pull that up.
And I apologize that I may not have heard something. I recognize that these are, you know, probably plans that still need to be further fleshed out, and that there'll be more details in the day to come. But I just wanted to clarify right now, because I was a little bit confused about, so what's the difference between like the hybrid schedule and the in-person? Because I thought the hybrid was part in-person and part streaming. And so, and then also, what is the rationale of having that 1 day hybrid and then an in-person? So just more clarification there.
The way that we are envisioning our 6th grade through 12th grade weekly schedule, and you know, there's some nuances and changes that can be, but Monday would be a day when everyone is online. That's our shortened day. But typically in what high school was of the late start, and then the early dismissal for the middle school, which has really turned into the early dismissal this school year. So since Monday, all students are online. The reason then that, for instance, 6th grade, the hybrid schedule, which is that expanded schedule. So we're going to be moving away from the current red remote schedule completely and going to periods of the day. And that's where we're going to have a longer student day. That new schedule for all of the middle school is set to start on March 8th. Then on Tuesday, we'll have our first day of in-person, because that's when we'll start the rotation. So A students, for instance, will likely come on Tuesday, and then B students on Wednesday, A 6th graders on Thursday, and then B 6th graders on Friday. So that first week will give our 6th graders a chance to be in the school twice in their cohort or their group before we bring in the 7th and 8th graders. So then the following week, all of 7th and 8th grade will have already been on that hybrid different schedule from the red remote, but they will start on March 16th, not 15th, because 15th again is a Monday, and that's when everyone's remote anyway. Does that help clarify that? And then the same repeats for the high school.
Yes, perfect, thank you. And then it's also, I love, you know, I think we have to come to this point where with the hybrid model, we have to do the live streaming. So I'm glad that we got to this point. And but with the live streaming, you know, currently our students are in class about, you know, just like the morning section. And I would tell you, I would love for my boys to be out from 8:30, from 8 to 3, right? So I'm not complaining about that schedule. But for those who are live streaming, that seems like a long time. And so, you know, I look forward to kind of more conversation later on, you know, because I know that right now there's still a lot of things going on there. Kind of, I think parents want more clarity of if they're going to be live streaming for that whole day, you know, how will it look? And even though, and, you know, just from my own teaching experience, students, they just kind of need intermediate kind of opportunities to, they don't want to be in school the whole day because they're concerned about their health. But, you know, where can we support them in having those experiences to ground them, to recenter them, to connect them? You know, because our students are going to be live streaming the whole time, we'll really be missing out on that. And so I know you're all working on it, and I look forward later on to hearing more about kind of our strategies to make sure that our students who are live streaming are still as connected as possible to the school, because it's just so hard, right? And especially now that, you know, now everybody's feeling it, but now there will be two kind of groups of students, and I want us all to be kind of going through the same process together. So more to kind of putting in.
Sorry, Director Din. We've been talking to some other school districts near and far who have had similar models. Meade School District on the east side of our state has worked quite a bit. I was in communication with a director from Enumclaw. They are getting ready to start their middle and high school right before, right after what is their midwinter break. And they've already talked about supporting us. They had said that when they had had a chance to talk to the Meade teachers and educators and principals, that really helped them to better understand. And one of their issues was what you just raised, and that is, what does this look like throughout the day? When I talked to a district in Colorado who I was familiar with, they had said the trade-off between the longer Zoom versus asynchronous days is completely worth it. Math teachers are able to move forward and enhance the learning. So there is a trade-off, and we're going to have to be mindful. But probably a good idea to just remind the community. Hopefully they saw it released from the city as well, that our youth and family services counselors have been restored to full-time after their cuts. And so when they return to the schools, they'll be a part of that overall whole child process as well.
And I think it's also important to note that for the students who are either home streaming because it's not their day to be in, or kids who are live streaming, it is going to be, there are going to be breaks built into the day, just like prior to the pandemic. Kids didn't sit in the same chair all day, every day. They did have breaks. They did have opportunities to, collaborate with others. And we know that there are some strategies and ways to do that, where kids could be in person and in Zoom and still doing some breakout rooms. And kids will just have independent work time, even during a class period, where they can, turn off their camera. And so they don't have to be intent on watching that screen the entire whole day. There will be breaks built in throughout as well.
Anyone else? Paul, Morgan, any questions? No, don't be shy. Okay, thank you so much. We'll continue moving forward. Moving on. Oh, so there's been a request for a break. It is 7:31, 10 minutes. Just so everyone knows, the board's been meeting since 4:30. So it's a little bit longer than an hour and a half. So, and we didn't really get a break in between our sessions. So thank you for your patience, everyone. And we will adjourn until 7:40. Thank you. So before we're all back, I'd like to know what accommodations are being made for all the COVID puppies for when the kids go back to school. Because mine's going to freak out.
I'm giving mine back.
We put, I told the boys to put our puppy in, our dog in, and within 30 minutes, she started whining. 30 minutes. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how are
Yes.
Yeah, I just had to text my husband at the very end of before the break because my puppy started scratching. Like I could just hear him gouging huge gashes in the door frame trying to get in. I was like, can you come put the baby
Yeah.
gate in place?
Mine is my daughter's shadow, Joey's shadow.
Yeah.
I mean, literally like is on her heels. So she'll probably start high school too.
I want to see the study that's done on whether the intelligence of our animals have increased while they've been doing remote learning with our children this whole time.
Or decreased.
I think their anxiety will increase as we all get
Yes.
more into in person and away from home because they're used to having us at home. And I think their anxiety will increase.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, well, I'm still working at home, unfortunately, but okay, 7:41. Do we have everybody, right? Yeah. Moving on to board policy 1800 OE9. Just kidding, I skipped 4A. 4A. All right, pushing through. Board policy 1800 OE7, financial administration, quarterly budget update, COVID impacts.
All right.
This is Ty, so I'm not sure who's going to drive the slide deck, if we gave Ty the ability to do that or if someone else wants to do that. He's going to go through what we know. It is mid-January, but we still don't have all of the pieces, but he's going to share with you what we do know as of today.
All right. Good evening. So this is the update for the first quarter, September through November. We received the December financial statements from the bank on Tuesday. So we will have the month of December closed and ready for some presentations by the next board meeting. And we should have it ready by the study session, which comes before the next board meeting as well. So when we get to the study session, we'll have additional information that's slightly more current. In terms of funding outlook, we know that January is the month when OSPI recalibrates everybody's apportionment based on their enrollment starting in October. October is the official enrollment count. Up through from September to December, it's what you've placed in your budget, what you projected, and then starting from January to the end of the year, fiscal year, and in August, it's based on what you actually have in terms of students. We're hoping to have the revised apportionment statements by the next board meeting. As soon as we get that, we'll let you as a board know what the change will be. And I already mentioned the December budget report. Legislative outlook, there are two school funding bills that we have a keen eye on currently in the legislature. The first one is a transportation hold harmless that was submitted to the Senate. It would, if passed, guarantee funding for the school districts based on the 1920 rider counts. So essentially taking us back to March and keeping us straight throughout the 20-21 school year. Enrollment hold harmless was submitted in the House. Essentially the same concept. It would take us back to 1920 enrollment numbers and then coast us through the end of the 20-21 school year. Right now, there's some interest in the bills. It's very early in the session. As we've been talking with our legislative contacts and lobbyists, it's going to be an interesting legislative session. Everything is remote. There's not going to be as many opportunities to go down to the Hill and grab a legislator as they wander by. It's going to involve a lot of phone calls, emails, Zoom calls. So it's going to take a slightly different strategy to see if we can help push this through. There's a sense that there is some K-12 fatigue in the state legislature. They've been dealing with McCleary and the McCleary fallout for several years now. And so there's a lot of push to start looking at other social projects. ESSERS 2, the most recent round of stimulus provided additional funding for school districts and states for education. We don't know exactly what that looks like right now. We got a nicely put email from OSPI saying in very nicely terms, hold your horses, we don't know anything yet. So as soon as we get more information from OSPI, we'll be passing that on to the board as well in terms of information.
We can share that what we do know about is it will be similar to the first ESSER stimulus package, the CARES Act one. Remember that for us was about $84,000. And because it's federal dollars, it is aligned with Title I qualifications. And so for us, that is a smaller amount. The state did apply some other state funds to make sure that every district got some. And in his meeting with superintendents earlier this week, Superintendent Reichdahl did mention that the federal dollars would be based on the Title I formula. He said the legislature may try to add some dollars to it, but he felt it was highly unlikely. And so we don't anticipate that it will be a significant amount more than what we received in the first round of the CARES Act dollars. Might be slightly more, but not a lot. Sorry, Ty.
No, thank you. Moving on, enrollment. As we've been going through September, October, and November, we saw a slight shift of our enrollment from general ed to the ALE, Alternative Learning Online, the MI Online platform. So the general education, basic education enrollment has ticked down just ever so slightly, but we are staying consistent within the very tight narrow band. As you can see from the solid line represents the current fiscal year. The dotted lines represent the past years. The 1920 year is the dotted maroon line. So you can see that based on our enrollment numbers, we have decreased significantly as we've been projecting for the last couple of years, except not significantly. We didn't project this. General fund revenues. So the actual budget stats report with all of those tiny little numbers that we all know and love so much is attached to the consent agenda for you tonight. Up through November, we received $16,529,000. We spent $16,531,000. So we are $2,000 above what we've taken in terms of revenue. But what does that mean in terms of what we projected? And essentially based on a normal year, our local funding is down significantly. We are not selling lunches. We are not collecting fines, fees, and course fees. Student activities are down. So our local non-tax revenue is down significantly. There's a slight shift, slight lag in state funding. Our federal and other funding is fairly consistent with what we had been expecting. In terms of expenditures, we are saving some money. It is down significantly in some categories, especially our utilities, our lunch service, our contract with Chartwells is also significantly down because they're not providing the same level of service that they have in the past. So the savings on Chartwells is offset by the fact that we're not bringing in any money from lunches. Our restrictions on overtime and other activities seem to be holding steady and keeping us from spending too much. So overall, we are down from what we spent last year, but that, again, that's offset by what we're down again from the previous year in terms of revenue. So right now we're holding steady. Projected ending fund balance based on the data that we have right now and what we've been projecting in terms of revenue change for the year. We are ended the month of November at 6.775 million. And we are looking at if the trends continue relatively consistently throughout the year, and these numbers will change as we add more data because the model looks at the data compared to the previous year's activities. But we are looking at ending at a $2.8 million fund balance, which is roughly about 4.5%. And this is consistent with what we had talked about in December or the November study session that the board made the decision that considering that we are in the middle of the school year based on all of the needs that our students have right now, and the best way to support the district is to use the reserves that we've been saving by policy and to use that reserves up. These projections look very consistent with that decision and the results that we had anticipated. So we will continue to update this chart as we close every month, and we'll bring it forward to you on a monthly basis. Just a reminder, as we look at the other funds, is there any questions about the general fund before I do a quick summation of our other funds? Any questions? All right. Just a reminder, as we're looking at the challenges that we face in the coming, this current fiscal year and the coming fiscal years, that we do have other funds. And some of those funds have, we've been carefully nurturing them to make sure that we have appropriate reserves for the activities that those funds serve. But those funds are legally restricted for those specific items, and we can't touch those for general operations. The Capital Projects Fund is proceeding as normal. We've had some minor roof repairs, room upgrades within the high school and other rooms around the district as we were getting ready to bring our special education students in. We are working on obtaining a grant from King County Parks Department to replace the playground at West Mercer Elementary. We're going to get rid of, we're going to get rid of all of the bark around the playground. We're going to bring the surface up and replace the big toys with accessible big toys. So it'll be inclusive. It'll be a much more inclusive playground. So this is a great opportunity for the district to work on that mission for West Mercer, as well as technology purchases. Director Ronser has been purchasing more of the Promethean smart boards for all of the elementary buildings. We're trying to finish out supplying the elementaries with those buildings. And so he's been working like gangbusters trying to get those ready to be delivered and in the rooms when we get our kids back so that they can be used well. Currently, our projected ending fund balance is just over $8 million. The yellow line represents the fund balance to date, and the gray line represents the cash flow month to month. So as we're moving through, we can keep track of how we're using the dollars as well as where our dollars are. Debt service, it's proceeding as normal. We'll have had our interest payment in December. We haven't seen that yet. We'll be closing that this week. So it'll show up on the next status report. ASB, ASB has not seen any significant increase in revenue. It is actually substantially less than what we had anticipated due to the prolonged learning environment. When we brought the budget to you in August, we had dates to start in September. And as the pandemic progressed, we had to continue pushing activities further back and back. And so as the ASB fund has been moving along, we've seen very little in terms of revenue and very little in terms of expenditures. So it's really just kind of holding steady. Transportation Vehicle Fund, we did purchase several buses as part of a fleet update. We received funding from the state to replace buses on a regular basis to ensure that our fleet is current and meeting all of the required safety inspections. We rotate our buses as soon as they are finished on the depreciation schedule. And the buses that we replaced in the fall were falling off that schedule. So we did have some activity in the fund, but not a significant level of activity. Are there any questions about the other funds? Director Jeannie Upton.
Was there something being adjusted in the transportation vehicle fund concerning depreciation and all of that, taking into account that we're not using our fleet as much as we currently are? Has that been adjusted, or is that going to continue forward?
So when we look at the depreciation for the transportation vehicle fund, it's not based on usage, it's based on time. So when we buy a bus, it starts a clock ticking on the age of that bus, and eventually after a certain number of years, it depreciates off, and we stop getting funding, reimbursed funding for that from the state. So we did, because there was that timing hiccup last year in the transportation vehicle fund, we did have to push some of these purchases off. And so a couple of the buses, I believe, had actually already fallen off the schedule, but not in a significant delay. Does that answer your question? Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Ty, for
Yes.
the capital projects fund, is it possible to use any of that for COVID mitigations inside buildings, or are we restricted from using it for that?
Depending on what we're looking at doing for mitigation strategies, we can use some of it. If we are significantly modifying a room or an office space, we can use those dollars. If we're just buying like plexiglass screens, that's not necessarily a capital expenditure. That's more of a equipment and a maintenance item. But if we are upgrading a ventilation system or significant repairs to a ventilation system, or working on making modifications to the exterior doors so that we have better airflow or better traffic control, those would fall under the modifications that we need. I'm not sure that we've had any significant need for modifications in our facilities. We've had some based on special education needs, just making sure that the rooms are up to date, and we've got a lot of the plexiglass shields up. But again, that's more of a general fund equipment purchase. Sorry, let me clarify one thing though. A lot of the technology needs that we've needed, the hotspots, additional iPads, computers, and the Promethean boards and additional screens for staff members, those are coming out of the technology half of the capital projects levy. So we are using those dollars to mitigate for the effects of COVID, but not in a facility sense.
Right. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Sorry, finding my mouse. Thank you very much for that update. Moving on to number 5, full process governance monitoring. A, board policy 1800 OE6, budget financial planning. So level 1 report. Any objection to starting off with a motion and going through it that way?
I move we find the district in compliance with OE6 budgeting and financial planning monitoring report.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Any questions? Any concerns? Hearing none, the motion is to find the district in compliance with board policy. I really need to get more than one monitor. Board policy OE6, budgeting and financial planning. All in favor of finding in compliance, please indicate by saying aye or yay or showing me in some way. And I vote yes as well. That is a vote of 5-0 in compliance. Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, this is a vote. This is the board finds the superintendent in compliance by a vote of 5-0. Moving on to board policy 1800 OE8, asset protection level. This is a level 1 monitoring. I propose we do it in the same way.
I move we find the superintendent in compliance with OE8 asset protection.
A second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions, concerns, anything to talk about? No, hearing none. The motion is to find the superintendent in compliance with board policy or OE8 asset protection. Please indicate compliance by saying aye or yay or thumbs up, and I do as well. Any nays, any abstentions? The board does find the superintendent in compliance by a vote of 5-0. Moving on, post monitoring language review, board policy 1800 OE9, communication and support to the board. This is a language review. Please take a moment to review the board policy. Any comments, suggestions, motions? Brian, you look perplexed. Are you still reading?
Oh, and I'm not muted.
You're not muted either.
Surprise. Whew. Yeah, I had 2 things I wanted to point out. One was section 3. See if I can find that. Yes, we had talked briefly about maybe adjusting the language to this. And you'll provide for the board a summary of the number of non-presidential election years, the reason for students who have entered, left, or chosen not to enroll in the district. If I'm kind of opening the door, I think Director Din, you had some questions or some suggested language around that.
I don't have any suggested languages, but I thank you for bringing it up because I think, you know, exit information is so important for us to drive, for us to make, you know, policies and decisions to better serve our students. And so I think every 4 years is just a long time. And I think the last discussion we had, we went down to at least 2 years. And there was conversation about how we make sure that, of course, you know, that we organize it in a way that we don't give out information about students. But I think the idea that what we came to a conclusion that we recognize the importance of getting this on a more timely manner, but also protecting students' privacy. So kind of that balance. So I open, yeah, I'm not very good with rewriting these things. So what would you recommend?
So I just wanted to chime in that we had wanted to wait until after we heard from the district staff whether or not it was like basically how onerous was it to have to do an extra cycle of this kind of reporting. And as my recollection is that that Fred, you said it at the meeting where it came up most recently that it wasn't too much to ask for. So I would propose that we just change the language to say, instead of saying every presidential election year, just say like every other year beginning, you know, I guess beginning 2019. I'm sorry, beginning 2020, every other year beginning 2020. So the next year it would be done would be 2022. I mean, I imagine that actually there'll be like a bunch of additional sort of surveying and so forth done as part of our kind of response to and recovery from the pandemic, right? Because that's been kids moving all around for unusual reasons. But so that would be my proposal, every other year beginning 2020 or counting from 2020, or maybe you say from 2022. I don't know, Brian.
I'd offer a friendly amendment to that of just changing instead of presidential election years to even years.
That makes so much more sense. Thank you. Yes.
That's what I was going to say too.
Director Tucker's recollection is correct. Doing it more regularly isn't a major deal. It makes it's just less data have to mess around with anyway. So it's probably a little easier to stay on top of it rather than letting it stack up. We do look at it and we do, take a look at those responses, but we don't collate it in the same way. The other thing I would add is I think in your last meeting, you had also talked about kind of a rolling on kind of a 3 or 4 year rolling nature to it. And then that way you could avoid having any small ends where we would have identifiable information. So if it's every 2 years, but we just add the new 2 years to the previous 2 years, we'd be able to 4-year cycle and not get into any trouble with some, ends less than 10.
I like that.
Should I take this as a formal motion? We need a formal motion to change it, right? And a second?
Yeah. Motion to, okay, yeah, if you're making the motion, I second it.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure, I figured I just wanted to do it right. Any other discussion? My feeling is I'm totally fine with it. I didn't find the report particularly helpful in terms of really getting the questions answered that we wanted answered. And I think that's because of the exit interviews, and hopefully, that process can be worked on with time to really dig into that information, which I think is really the criteria that people are looking for, is why are people leaving? But I'm certainly not opposed if people want to see it more often. I'm totally fine with that. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Hearing none. Motion is to modify the language in number 3 to, we could just say biannually provide, or provide for the board a summary of the number of the reasons for students who have entered, left, or chosen not to enroll in the district on an even or every even year. However someone worded that, that's the gist of it. Sound good? We can vote on it now, or we can agree to move it to the consent agenda for next meeting.
I would just vote on it.
Vote on it now. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we'll just clean up that language and then in whatever way, obviously the gist of it is understood. Yes, and you have another one, Brian.
I do. Sorry. Number 18, which is interesting because the other item we have on our agenda tonight also addresses the same thing. So I don't know if this is an overlap, so maybe we can release this data in either one or the other. It's annually report to the board on incidents involving the use of restraint or isolation. We also receive that in the monitoring report for OE3, appropriate treatment of community members. And in that we had wanted to add, or I had hoped to add, classroom exclusion by demographic on a rolling 5-year cycle. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate to make the change in both, but it seems like it's the same data being reported in 2 different policies. And we certainly don't need to be doing that unless it tells a different story in each.
And to go off that, Brian, we also had conversation about how we should have to put, broke down by gender, by race, ethnicity, but how can we make a larger policies in that when we provide data, right, we should make every attempt to break it down into, as close down to the demographic information as possible. Right. And so that's, we talked about that too, instead of like inserting everywhere, by ethnicity and race. And so where would that be another language area kind of for us to add that in? Or do we want to tackle it here?
So I guess I have 3 things. One is the one you just brought up of a separate policy that would further define how we're looking data to be broken down by demographics or whatever. The second thing would be whether this is redundant. I certainly don't want data being reported in a redundant manner. But the third would be just adding classroom exclusion. In our other report, OE3, we see expulsions and suspensions, but we don't necessarily see classroom exclusion. And so that was my kind of springboard, was that additional piece of data.
Do we not have a policy in how data is broken down? I can't imagine we don't.
I don't think there's really a set policy that lays out how it should be done when we're reporting out. So I'm trying to think about, is it 1610, Aaron, you may have to help out with this one. 1605, I'm looking at, I'm sorry, 1610, equity and diversity. Potentially that's where it could be added, or we could look at, which then could govern the way that reporting is done. So you don't have to go through each OE and set that up.
That makes more sense if we can do it that way, and then just put the exclusion in this area.
I would be satisfied with that. So it was, for me, it would be adding exclusion, classroom exclusion, and eliminating this data point either in this policy or eliminating it over in OE3, which is the very next thing we're going to talk about. I'm not sure which would be more appropriate.
Dr. Rundle?
I have always found it a little odd that it's inappropriate treatment of community members. And because while students are community members, they're the priority. They're why our schools are built. So it seems to me that it would be a little bit more into not with community members. I can see why it wound up there based on where the others, but it makes more sense given the context of the other elements that come into 9, that it would go there. That being said, you know, it just 9 becomes a bigger and bigger report, but if that reduces on 3, no big deal. And it falls at a decent time of year, kind of that December timeframe from a reporting out, just from our department's perspective, it's actually well timed.
If we want to move forward and discuss something, we need a motion for something. If we're not ready to do that for people proposing changes, I would suggest that we move this to the next meeting and that be worked on outside of the meeting.
I would be okay with that. Because it was just today that I noticed that, or going over this report for today, that I noticed the redundancy. And I can see in OE3, which we're going to review, it's about communication of discipline policies, which seems to be more in line with like handbooks and all of that, which is more of a community concerned communication with the community as opposed to annual reports, which is more, I think, here in OE9. But I can, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind taking another cycle through to try to collect my thoughts and organize with input, of course, of anyone who has an opinion.
Does anyone wish to work on that with Brian? So are you proposing we bump OE9 and OE3 both for language review to the next meeting? Anyone,
Yes, please.
Anyone opposed to that? Okay, so please, let's move language review A and B to the next meeting, and we will see if we have a proposal to discuss. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to AC, Board Policy 1001, Governance Commitment. Please take a moment to review and any proposed motions, changes, concerns, discussions. This is one that we just rewrote, so that doesn't surprise me. Okay, seeing none, moving on to 6D, Board Policy 1005, Board Officer and Board Member Duties. This is also one that was modified recently. Any proposed changes, motions, concerns? Yes, Brian.
I would like to start a conversation with the board about the potential of adding a new officer position to the board that would be assigned annually. With all of the work that's happening across the island and diversity, equity, and inclusion, I wondered, just as we have a legislative representative, if we might have a representative focused specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as the legislative representative tends to fall as the liaison to the superintendent's equity advisory, perhaps this new position could fall to the various groups as a liaison to the various groups that are leading this work as they lead up. So I know the PTAs are doing it, our schools are doing it. Maybe that's too much work for a board director, but I wanted to float the idea of having a director who would each year be specifically designed to be the liaison in these areas on behalf of the board.
So I would propose, so that we can notice it correctly, that we, if there's consensus, that we put that on the agenda for the next meeting to have a discussion about it. And we can note it in the, I don't even know what section it would be under, because it isn't really language review. It's more than that.
Kind of language review for this section, no?
Well, it's adding language, yes, but it's adding substantive. So it could fall under language review. I'm just feeling like it should have more notice if there's any community input that is wanted. Do we want to have a discussion on it first?
I think it's a great idea.
We'd usually do something like this in a study session.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea to really be intentional about our work towards equity. You know, there are different strategies to whether we have one diversity class or do all of, is diversity embedded everything? So is one board member responsible for this, and really what do they add to it if they just, because we are already on all these different, we're already liaisons, right? And so then how does this add to our work and better strengthen our work? So should we have that one person, or is that a responsibility of all the board members to really view everything through an equity lens? So that would be, and when we have that conversation, Brian, that would be a conversation I would like to process more.
So we have a study session coming up, but I think that agenda is pretty full with budget discussions. We can just, so it seems like there's enough of a consensus to get this added for a discussion for a study session. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah, okay. So we will make note of this and get it added to a study session in as near the future as possible.
Thank you. I just figured this was a good opportunity to springboard that into the middle of the room.
I think it's perfect. Thank you. Any other suggestions, motions, concerns, discussions? Hearing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Motion is to approve the consent agenda as published. If you approve, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 5-0. Superintendent announcements.
Nothing major, just a reminder that next Thursday is our study session, our annual January study session. And because the board doesn't have new members, we don't have obligations for the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act training, but we will be doing the study session around budget and the budget implications that Ty referenced earlier in the quarterly report, and really focused on 21-22 and what are the implications for building the assumptions for that budget. And then there is, prior to that meeting, just to remind all of you, a linkage session with our community service groups, Rotary, Kiwanis, Chamber of Commerce. And so normally we get together and have breakfast. So bring your coffee and whatever your favorite breakfast is, and we'll meet with them on Zoom. And then prior to our next regular meeting on the 28th, we are scheduled to have our linkage session with the Mercer Island Schools Foundation directors at 5 for that meeting. We felt it was an awful lot to add in 2 linkage sessions and a board session because of the setting. We know how taxing it can be on everyone to be in Zoom for that long of a time. So just to keep those on your calendar, those linkage sessions. And I believe that's the only announcements that I have.
Thank you. Board announcements, inquiries, and reports. Legislative report.
A lot's going on. Obviously, we've started into the new session. It's a long session, and it's going to be a really interesting session. So as things come up, please ping me. I'll be working with strategic advocacy through WASDA, working on their WASDA's overarching priorities. But if there's anything that's popping up that you feel you on behalf of the board would like me to look at weighing in on, it looks like we can, up to a week ahead of an agenda item coming up, weigh in for, against, or other. And I can certainly work to align that with our local priorities. But I'll certainly work with Superintendent Kolaski and President Lurie if there's anything that comes up that we feel that we locally need to weigh into. We also have the benefit of, we have 3 representatives in the state, unlike other districts that have many, many representatives. And we all kind of have relationships with them, which is important. So definitely leaning in those relationships. This year, we're working towards our legislative conference coming up in February. That's the joint conference between WASA, which is the School Administrators Association, WASBO, which is the Business Officers Association, and then WASDA. I am already registered for that as a member of the legislative committee, and will be hosting our regional meeting in preparation for that. There is a fee with the legislative conference this year, but because we're not constrained by an auditorium, depending on that cost and what we can afford as a district, many people would be able to lean into that conference. The governor will speak, Superintendent Reichdahl will be there, and the leaders from our 3 organizations will be there to discuss our joint priorities. And that's what this conference is about, is the joint priorities, shared top issues of our 3 organizations. And then that normally leads to our Day on the Hill, which involves our student representatives. We know that you are the most powerful people to speak to our legislators. This year, because of COVID, instead of a day on the Hill, it will be a week on the Hill. We'll be looking at how to schedule those meetings, and I will be in contact with our student reps through the superintendent to see if you're able to weigh in. It'll be a Zoom conference, and so it'll be a bit limited as to how many people can be on those calls. And we'll have to be really organized, and it'll also just be that 15-minute window of time we're expecting. But I want to make sure that we have student voice guiding us in those rooms, because when you speak, they listen more than any of the rest of us. So I look forward to getting those joint priorities to you as soon as they're announced by our 3 organizations, and to how you can work those. From PTA advocacy, I've managed to reconnect with PTA advocacy at the council level. As legislative rep, typically you are the liaison. Had a really nice session on the 17th of December. A lot of talk about communication, the back and forth, live streaming. There was the sense that there can never be enough communication, and I think we've learned that. No matter how many wonderful modalities that the district and the board comes up with in communicating, there'll always be a desire for more. So, but there was much appreciation for the amount of communication and support and partnership with that organization. So I appreciate that. And we're seeing new things coming out of PTA Council and National PTA. So I'm trying to keep ahead of all of that. There's just a lot going on right now. Oh, the final part for the legislative rep part. For anyone who wants to know what's happening with WASDA, you can go to the strategic advocacy page, which used to be government relations, is now strategic advocacy. And there is a bill watch, which is a document that's constantly being updated, and it will show you what bills are currently being observed by WASDA, what they plan to weigh in on, and how they plan to weigh in. And that's the schedule in advance. So if you want to know where that strategic advocacy work is happening, you can find that there on the webpage. And also there's another document that they have that's going to be updating on a weekly basis as to more in full how things are being weighed in on, who's weighing in and testifying and all of that. So if you want more information on how to access that information, if you're curious about it, I can help get you there through the WASDA page, but you can also find it yourself under strategic advocacy. And then just like tonight, every Thursday evening, strategic advocacy hosts kind of our, essentially what is the COVID-19 networking call that happens every Thursday through WASDA. That call actually initiated through legislative committee and this legislative update. So in the evenings when we don't have a board meeting, you can register for that and sit in on that phone call and hear Marissa and Logan and the team and Brian Sims talk about what's happening and the big trends that are coming. The last piece, as you're talking with folks, and I was thinking about this earlier with the financial report, we're being cautioned to not use the term hold harmless. Apparently there's a lot of fatigue around that. So instead to talk about budget stability. So the new buzzword is budget stability. If everyone can memorize that and use that in your conversations, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Announcements, inquiries, and reports. Anyone want to go first?
Sure, I can go
Thank you.
first. The first one, I attended the IMS PAC meeting. The big discussion there was around what hybrid learning would look like. Parents and teachers and the principals are all involved in this group. And so, as we heard today as well, there's still, parents are trying to develop an understanding of what that means, how that would work, how the schedules would go about for their kids. But very clearly, people were very excited about how that would go. And the parents were looking forward to kids being in school. One quote was, so impressed with how middle school is being run and a great model for how education will be moving forward. So I think there was clearly a sense of excitement. There was also, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but there was a sense of excitement that 2021-2022 school year would be more normal and in person. And I think there was some optimism that could happen there, especially in light of all the hybrid learning and people kind of coming into school a little bit. So that was exciting, and it's again great group. That this time our topic was hybrid learning. Previously, we've had other topics around social justice and equity and diversity as well in the PAC, and so it's so much to do. So many things changing, and we're seeing, I mean, it's important to recognize every year it's a new set of students pushing boundaries and testing the system. And so we keep seeing the same problems come up in different ways, but it's a very new group of kids, very new group of parents, and very, very important to recognize that these are very formative years for these kids. Another issue that has come up, we are using a snow day because of power outage. We've got one more snow day coming up. There was some thought that because of the way, we've been doing everything by Zoom and things like that, maybe we should be using the other makeup day, expect to use it for education anyway, and take a day off at the end of the calendar year. Just to keep kids in school and working as opposed to congregating together in some way. days off tend to be problematic sometimes for that reason. So that's come up from a few other parents. And then finally, I think the budget issues should still, thrilled to learn budget stability for transportation and enrollment is on the docket. I think the other one, because we've got the educational maintenance and operations levy ahead of us, it would be interesting if the limit on that could be raised from $2,500 to $3,000 per kid. I think we're allowed to do $2.70 per $1,000 of property tax value, but we're always underneath that because we are capped by the $2,500 levy limit per student. And I think that should be another thing that could be looked at as well. Inflation has hit, costs have increased, especially for benefits and other things like that. And we've just had no room to fix this, especially for districts like ours who are capped at 2,500. So I think that should be opened up, especially since Seattle and a bunch of other districts have had that open up and we haven't. So those were the three things. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Tam?
I'm next. David, about that no power day. We used to have snow days, right? But now we have a no Wi-Fi or power day. And I would tell you that in the beginning, it was actually beautiful at my house. For the first time, like we had no power, so the boys took out Scrabble. And that was the first time I didn't have to literally turn off the Wi-Fi to get them off. And it's hard to turn off the Wi-Fi because right now their school is so tied to the Wi-Fi. And so we were lucky to get power back early. And so for that 3 hours, the boys were playing Scrabble, which they haven't played for, I don't know, 8 months. Yeah. So on Monday, upcoming Monday, is Martin Luther King's Jr.'s Day. And I hope that we all take this time to really learn more and reflect, how through our thoughts and actions, through our practice and policies, how we are more boldly living as anti-racist, and how it has to be intentional, and it just can't be that we're not doing, but how are we actively addressing it. And I saw on my Facebook, it popped up that our Mercer Island High School leadership class held a virtual MLK Junior Assembly, and where they were addressing what it meant, what does racial social justice mean to them. And so I look forward to watching it, and I hope that everybody watch it and support our students as they go through their journey of how to be more supportive and really unpack everything that they've been learning and be part of the solution moving forward. So thank you to the Mercer Island High School leadership team for helping guide our students through this process. And I look forward to watching it. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass.
Okay. Brian?
A few things. I've got some reports that are rolling out at the state level that I'm excited to share with you. That's not part of my island work, but I forgot to mention that. I met with Island Park. I think we actually got in 2 Island Park meetings and a Northwood PAC meeting. So Island Park is rocking it. Great feedback from the 2 groups. There continue to be questions around, I noticed there were a lot of questions around standards-based grading and how that's working out in the time of COVID classwork. There seems to be some anxiety and stress from some families that their kids aren't hitting all 4s all the time. And so it's difficult to kind of walk that back and say, 3s are at standard and 3 is is fantastic. It's great. And if you're hitting 4s, that's fantastic and that's great. Even if you're at a 2.5, a 2.25, you're approaching that standard. You're doing, you know, halfway through the year. But there was a lot of anxiety around that being brought up. Also, questions around how are we assessing students. So I know at the elementary school, they're leaning into Ames Web and some other assessment tools, which is great. But it was good to see the principals addressing that with parents. And hopefully that information is getting back out as well of how students are being assessed for their progress and where they are, and that students aren't falling behind, that students actually are doing quite well in many areas. Not all of our students, but many. So that's important. And then another question that came up, and maybe it's because it's centered within the elementary schools between Island Park and Northwood, and then the MIPA is a part of the advocacy group, but questions are floating as to kindergarten registration for next year. So I know we're coming into that season with the questions of when is it time to register, what will be available, and how that registration plays into projected enrollment and allocation for next year. So I love that our families are really looking at enrollment and how that links to allocation, and the pieces are coming together. It took me years to put all those pieces together. So yeah, I appreciate that those questions are coming up. So I think that covers it for my groups.
Thank you.
I think I'll be super quick. So I had the distinct pleasure of judging the DECA competition that was this past weekend, that was obviously done remotely. So in a new way for students and teachers and judges. And I didn't actually judge as a representative of Mercer Island School District. My sister's the DECA advisor at Redmond High School, and she had someone drop out last minute. So she called me and said, will you judge? And it happened to be business law, so that was appropriate. But I did get to judge 2 of our Mercer Island students. So that was really fun. And our students are amazingly resilient. What they did was they recorded up to 15 minutes for their presentation, and they got the questions that judges usually ask ahead of time. So they incorporated that into their presentations. And, you know, I think pros and cons, the ones that I saw did remarkable. So just our students are resilient. We miss you guys in the classrooms. We miss seeing you guys there, but you're doing good things, and hang on, it's gonna happen soon. I know it's the, I think Paul and Morgan mentioned it's, you know, the last week of the semester and then finals next week, and for middle school and high school. And, you know, it's been a rough semester. It's been a semester of lots of new things and lots of changes, and everyone's handling it great. When I hear teachers, overhear teachers in class walking through everything they need to do, the support they're giving our students is outstanding. And, you know, I know that there are many that are struggling still, but we're all in this together and working hard. So good luck to all of our students who have finals coming up and getting last assignments in and projects done and papers written and things like that. You guys should be really, really proud of yourselves for getting through this and hopefully getting through it as successfully as possible. I really want to just express gratitude and congratulations to our leadership team, to our staff, and to, you know, especially to our kindergarten teachers, for our kindergartners returning to school. We all know how challenging this is on every spot on the spectrum, in terms of excitement and, you know, kind of freaking out. And you know, we all do it, and we understand. And yeah, I'm really glad that so far it's been unremarkable, which is great. I totally agree. I love that description. And I got to tell you, you know, you guys all know Brian and I meet with Eastside board directors every week. And first thing they wanted to know last week was, how's it going and how did it go? And so I can tell you that we are the envy of many of the districts around. And not that we necessarily want to compare, but it feels good to have that success, and just really look forward to continuing it. On that note, as part of the, I'm going to kick myself for bringing this up, but as part of the WASDA call today, there was discussion about boards writing in support of advocating for vaccines for staff, educational staff. I know all the pros and cons about it. I just want to bring it up to see if we want to raise it for discussion, and have that discussion as a board, if that's something that we want to do. I know it's very controversial because I know that we all want our teachers to get vaccinated, but there's lots of people that need to get vaccinated, and that's the issue. So I'm not seeing anyone jump and say they want to have a discussion about it, which I'm okay with. I think there are a lot of places that are doing that advocating. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone say, so I just wanted to bring that up and give us an opportunity to weigh in on whether or not we wanted to do something like that.
Well, can I say that, of course, it's something that we support and we would love to advocate, but I feel that is also something that if the teachers come to us to advocate, but I haven't heard, and I just don't want to be presumptuous to make a statement on behalf of the teachers. So if the teachers come and ask us to support, I would totally do that. But I haven't
teachers are advocating for it strongly, and we wouldn't advocate on behalf of them. We would be advocating on behalf of students that would, it would be a position from the board. But if there's not interested in doing it, like I said, I just wanted to throw it out there and give us an opportunity to weigh in if anyone wanted to have that discussion. Okay, I'm not suggesting we have the discussion now. I'm saying we can get it on an agenda to have one if there's interest.
I'll just add in, so I have lots of opinions on it, and we've having a discussion at legislative committee and all sorts of stuff. So if the board wants to have that discussion, I certainly have a lot of information to share, but I don't personally feel a need to weigh in as a board.
Okay. Unless someone's saying they want to weigh in, I wanted to present it and we can move on from there. So that's it. That's all I got. So we concluded our executive session before we started our meeting. So we do not need to reconvene into executive session. And all we have left is to adjourn.
I prepared a 20-page PowerPoint. I'd like to know, I'm kidding. I've moved that we adjourn for the evening.
Seconded.
Any discussion? I just want to say, by the looks on your faces, those of us who have been at meetings since 4:30 especially, I would say 4+ hours is beyond our capacity to have a meaningful meeting. So let's just keep that in mind. And all in favor of adjourning, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned by a vote of 5-0 at 8:48 p.m. Thank you, everyone, very much.
Director Tucker, will you hang out for a second? Did we lose her? Oh, there you are. Will you hold up your sign for me? Does it read the right way for you? There you go. I joked at Legislative Committee that it always reads backwards to me, and I've never corrected you on that, and I was chastised.
You were chastised?
It's because it's I have to hold it up backwards for me. No, sorry, I have to hold it up right way for me, but in my head, I'm always thinking that I have to turn it around so that it's backwards to me, so that it'll be the right way in front. Yeah. I need a two-sided one like yours.
We will let Brian chastise you for anything.
He can make me, I'll happily accept one of those nice, colorful placards if he wants to make me one.
I'm going to start selling them on Etsy.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
A little too
It came up in the legislative committee meeting. I said, there's a board director that often has hers backwards, and I've never Whoever pointed it out, and they said, Brian, you
Right.
have to support her. So
Yeah, because really I'm forcing everyone to read it backwards. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I can read it backwards.
Yeah.
It works that way. So, all right.
thank you.
Thanks all. Good night.